The onboarding plays a huge part in mobile apps, right? It's obviously the most important thing, I would say, because if nobody gets through it, it doesn't matter again, right? It's like secondary. It's like, okay, marketing's number one because people need to know about it. Step two is like people getting into your app. And if they don't finish the onboarding, it doesn't really matter because they're dropping off, right?
Would you rather have 1,000 active but free users or 10 paid users for your app specifically?
For my app specifically, I think 10 paying users. And the reason I say that is because...
Welcome to the first episode of the Design Lab podcast. In this podcast, I'm inviting founders and product people to learn more about how they design, develop, and launch products. I'm Nick. I'm a designer and founder of Grauberg, a design studio that helps startups to do exactly that, to design their websites, apps, and software. And today with me is Wyatt Feaster. And Wyatt is the founder of Blockwalk, an app that blocks your most distracting apps until you hit your specific step goal. And Wyatt is not only a founder, but he also was a designer for already 10 years for Fortune 500 companies and startups like Etsy. And then transitioned more into a founder role. So I think he's a really interesting character, and I'm happy to have him on the podcast. Welcome, Wyatt.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk and share all the insights I can with the audience here.
Awesome. Me and Wyatt, we already have been on to live sessions, live podcasts together with Chris. So we already have some practice chatting. But yeah, this time is really about Wyatt, not about anything else, and about how he approaches it. So yeah, pleasure to talk to you. And I would love to talk about Blockwalk and how you approached building it, how you approached designing it, and also why you actually got started with your app.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess I could start off by maybe talking a little bit about, the background to get to here, because I think that'll help with some of the context too, right, on Blockwalk. So, after spending 10 years in design, I think a big part of me is, always wanted to be that founder. You see that, you work for other people, you do the side of things where you end up just being like, I feel like there's got to be a little bit more out there. And so went starting to do some attempts and things like that, right? And we can touch a little bit more on kind of the other products in a bit, but I think it is after a couple, multiple kind of failed attempts, you try some things, you do some things. I kind of took a step back and was like, hey, how can I make this attempt as simple as possible to reduce my risk for failure this time around, to be able to succeed? And I think that was kind of one of the things as I was starting to get into building Blockwalk and looking for something was like, it needs to be super simple where me as a solo person can design the experience, build it out, get it out the door, and then start finding users. And so that's kind of where, the initial thinking started to come from. And I essentially saw, people in the area doing maybe some similar things, right? Kind of had a proven product, an area that we know that like, hey, app blockers or distractions or focus apps or things like that, like have been done. There's a demand for them. I don't have to prove that there's product market fit. But I want it to be simple enough that I can kind of get my feet wet and start doing that. And so, for me, it was like kind of like a personal thing or a personal journey that was like, hey, I know that as a, designer, office person, I spend way too much time sitting down and behind a screen. And I also know that I want to be more mindful about like being in the fitness space and journey and all of that good stuff, because that's kind of been a whole thing my whole life is health and fitness and all that kind of stuff. And so I think being able to merge kind of those two things together was a big kind of just like personal win for me. Because for years I always wanted to build something that was in the fitness space, and I just never really knew like what that was, or it seemed so big or so hard to chew or anything like that. And so it was just a simple thing that I was like, okay, I merge these two. There's a product market fit because there's, competitors in the space. And I just go for it, right? And just start kind of building. And so I think that was kind of the early catalyst for kind of the idea is finding a super, super simple thing that I felt confident in being able to execute.
All right. So you saw there is already some competition and you thought for yourself, I want to make this as simple as possible. So I can't really, yeah, fail with it. How did you approach like designing the first few features? Did you like, did you do any competitor analysis or did you just sketch your personal workflows and then try to build something like that?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a great question. So to start off the whole thing, I think I saw some videos of of competitors doing like similar things, but not exactly what I wanted to do. Right? Like I know there's an app that went viral that like you do push-ups to unlock your apps, right? Like, and that was one that was like, okay, that's a cool idea, but like anybody that's probably older than 25 years old, right, is probably not going to sit down and do push-ups in the middle of their day to earn using TikTok, right? Like that's a very, very younger demographic, very virality piece. And like, and like as a desk worker, right? Like I'm not going to do that, right? I'm not going to go do push-ups in an office to earn that. And so um, I saw that helped kind of stimulate some ideas. Um, look through the app store a little bit. Is there anybody doing my idea of like the step to unlock? There's a few there was like maybe two when I looked in there that had like 12 reviews and I said, okay, so nobody's doing that specific thing or is the market leader in that. There's the plain app blockers that just block your apps under a certain time, but those don't have like a fitness trigger to them, right? So I saw there being a little bit of that opportunity knowing that like things have been successful in that space. And so it's like a proven thing. And so it's just like carving out your own niche. And so that was kind of the lightweight research that I did to at least be like, okay, there's a market for it. It's been proven. There are people running a business in it, but it's not specifically the trigger mechanism that I had in my head doing that. Also knowing that I was trying to like that I have been trying to lose body fat right now. And I know that like getting daily movement in plays part in that. So that helped kind of get me even more excited about that. And then from there, I just started to like, honestly, I got in and did my designer 101 and got into like FigJam and just started like sticky noting out my ideas. Like what would be like the most basic experience that this would be to make this happen. And that's kind of where the process started. Um, at least early on from the competitor kind of research and ideation.
And so you had this, you had the idea, you did some research, then you went into FigJam. For everyone who doesn't know what FigJam is, it's basically just a big whiteboarding tool where you can put on post-its. And how did how did the next few steps look like? And how long did the actual process took you from, hey, I really want to do this to I have my first user or the app is live in the App Store?
Yeah, yeah. So I think from there, I kind of like intentionally from after past kind of failures, I was like, I spent too much time on design, the architecture, the marketing website, all of this shit that like doesn't matter. At least that early on, right? So I was like, okay, I have 2 weeks is when I'm time boxing myself to design out the experience, figure out the architecture, um, and build and ship the product. And then after that, then I can fix bugs, right? And then I'll submit it. So it was kind of like trying to time box myself to a sprint, but essentially 2 sprints fully to get it up and live and everything, right? So that was kind of a challenge to me to be able to make sure that like, hey, I'm not spending time on the wrong things. I don't get caught up. Um, so I really worked a long time in the beginning with Claude, kind of going back and forth to build out like a product requirement document to really get in there. And once I kind of got my own light way of doing it, in FigJam, like, hey, okay, so what is all the stuff that's required? How do I understand and make sure that that's going into the product? Um, and then I kind of like myself, like wrote out every single step of the onboarding experience because I knew how important that was going to be for a mobile app. I wrote it out word for word, what the steps would be, what the action the user needs to take, all of that stuff, and then refined it with Claude, built out the full PRD, which is product requirements document if you don't know what that is. But where it gives everything like use cases, all the stuff around how a user would use it, what the market is, who the audience is, all the stuff around that. And then was able to then go with Claude and say, okay, I want to go build this thing, right? Here's my basically target, and I want to build it with Cursor. And so help me to be able to assume that I know zero about code, that I've never used Cursor before, that basically I'm 5 years old. Like walk me through it. Tell me like in normal language or fifth grade or whatever I said. I can't remember if I said 5 years old or fifth grade or something like that. But walk me through every step of the process so that I can fully immerse and understand everything, and we can build this together. And that's kind of how I started. And we can elaborate a little bit more on that, but that's at least to kick things off and get started. That's kind of what I did, and then like time boxed myself. And there's a lot more nuance after that, but that's kind of how we got started.
That's, I mean, I wrote down so many questions. I don't even know where to start, but I think the most interesting thing to me is, like you said, the onboarding is really important. And like, what role does the onboarding play in your app right now? And how did you learn as a designer how to build a good onboarding?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the onboarding plays a huge part in mobile apps, right? It's obviously the most important thing I would say, because if nobody gets through it, it doesn't matter again, right? It's like secondary. It's like, okay, marketing's number one because people need to know about it. Step two is like people getting into your app. And if they don't finish the onboarding, it doesn't really matter because they're dropping off, right? And
Mm.
I knew that was a huge important part. And I know there's a whole bunch of different ways. And I think just from years of seeing so many different onboarding pieces, what makes people drop off an experience, what's asking too much information, understanding people need to build trust, um, knowing that like an app like this, you need them to have a little bit of time sunk cost to be able to, convert. Um, if they don't complete the onboarding, the app provides no value, especially with my app, right? Like if they don't go in and set up the app blocking and that all in the onboarding experience, then when they get into the app, there's no point. So knowing that like there's some critical things that they need to be able to do to get through was really important. And then just trying to understand like some of the human psychology around it, right? Like what's an emotional pull through the onboarding, what makes people feel invested. So for me, a lot of it was like understanding as you go through, like what are people aware of? They're aware of they probably, if they've made it to download your app, they're probably aware that like, hey, they spend too much time on their phone. They are aware of this. Um, but what they might not realize is how that correlates directly to time in their life and like compounded over time, right? And so trying to think about that emotional pull, because purchasing is an emotional decision. And understanding some of those things, I think make a big part of high converting onboarding is like introducing them to the product, understanding who they are individually, showing them kind of like that problem or the emotional pull, how your product can solve that emotional pull and problem that they're facing, and then kind of reach that outcome if they're using your product.
Hmm. So if you could nail it down to like 3 elements that make or break an onboarding experience, what would you say?
I would say, first off, it's asking way too much of them up front without providing any value. I would say would be number one, because you will lose people so fast if you immediately ask for everything, but you provide them no value or reason behind it. I would say number two is not setting proper expectations of what they're about to get into. I think that creates a lot of high friction um, on it. And number three is Man, that's a good question. What would I think number 3 is? Because there's so many things. I think those 2 stick out, but I think not feeling personalized to them would be number 3. If it feels too generic, then there's not really then it's like, "Oh, this like, why would I continue down this?" Right? I think that's a big one, especially because of how far software's come, right? Like, if they download their app, they wanna feel like you're talking to them, you're addressing their specific pain point. So I think in my opinion, those would kinda be the 3 for me, which I'm curious, like, kinda ask the question back to you, like, what do you think? Like, what is your you've been designed too, and for a long time, like, what's your kinda top 3 of onboarding?
Yeah, it's I've seen this especially when it comes to freemium models where you have a longer onboarding compared with like a sales page in the end. If it doesn't feel personalized, you kinda don't really want to invest the time. And there are a lot of apps that like, yeah, I know I need to have this 7-step onboarding, but then they don't do anything with this data in the end, they will lose a lot of trust. And if you do that, that's an immediate red flag for me. The second thing is if people don't even have an onboarding.
Hmm.
So you get prepared with the marketing, you download the app, and I've talked to a founder who like vibe coded his app, and he was sharing me all the features. The meeting took almost an hour, and in the end, I'm like, it took you an hour to explain a simple app. Imagine what happens if a new user comes into that. So yeah, not having an onboarding is like, of course, not the best. And the third thing is just picking the wrong business model. You have
Hmm.
the freemium model, you have the hard paywall where you don't get anything until you subscribe, and based on that, you or based on the value of your product, you need to pick the right one. So freemium, of course, if you can allow some features that are free, just to make it annoying enough to have people actually upgrade. And for instance, for AI apps or like apps that actually cost money to run, the hard paywall makes a lot more sense. So I would say those 3 things when it comes to the apps that I at least designed. Um, yeah, this is what I would suggest. Um, maybe I don't know how you decided on which on which business model Blockwalk decided. Well, what's your experience so far with having the business model set and how you can actually get people to upgrade and pay for
Mhm.
the app?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I went with I think there's a couple thoughts, right? Like a lot of competitors or apps in the store now that are being successful are doing like the hard paywall, which is kind of what
Hmm.
I've opted to do. Like
Hmm.
you go through the time sunk, you do it, you convert on the paywall. Um, and I think that's effective. And I think specifically one of the also reasons why I chose that is um, I just don't see personally as there being a ton of value in giving away a free version of the product for a low ticket cost item. Like, I'm sure you've seen enough, I've seen enough over the years. When you have it takes a lot of energy and time and marketing and campaigns and value proving in the product to convert somebody from a free user to a paid user. And a lot of the times, the people that are free users will never upgrade to a paid version, like a whole bunch. And so for me, I feel like sometimes the effort to reward on a low ticket is not necessarily the same time investment that is worth it. That's just what my gut says, right? And also, if there's others out there in the market doing the same thing, they've found similar results. So that's what we opted to do. In past products, I've done the freemium version, right, where you do the free version. Like I found the results like, yeah, it's hard to get people to upgrade, right? Like a lot of people just want to try stuff and then they don't come back. And then it's hard to understand, like, it's harder to get to product market fit. It's harder to understand, like, who is the people that actually would pay for your product. There are a lot of them are lurkers or lookers. And like that becomes really challenging and frustrating, especially as a solo founder. Um, you find out that a lot of people are nice to have and not must have, right? Your product is nice to have, but not a must have for them, or it's not really changing the thing. And I think that's kind of one of the also the kind of the decisions, right, around that, of why, yeah, why I went that direction. I think higher ticket makes sense for premium though, like freemium model. I think if you have a higher ticket cost, then a lot of that makes sense, or a limited amount. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question for you. Would you rather have 1,000 active but free users, or 10 paid users for your app specifically?
For my app specifically, I think 10 paying users. And
Hmm.
the reason I say that is because if it's 10 paying users, I can, assuming they purchase like an annual plan, I can use that money towards testing marketing spend, or testing an ad, or seeing like what kind of things resonate. But if I have 1,000 paying users, if even what 1% of those converts of 1,000 paying users, that's 100. But I also doesn't give me a signal necessarily of who, like, I don't know. I feel like it's like a lot of work to try to convert people to that. Um, and I think people are not as invested if it's a free version. I'll put it that way. Like the quality of user and data and buy-in that you get from your users free versus a paid is very different. People are more incentivized to give you feedback, to see the product succeed, to spread the word about something if they're paying for it, right? Versus like a they're probably not even going to mention something to their friend. They're like, oh yeah, whatever. But if they're using it and they're like thoroughly invested because they purchased it, they're probably going to share in longer term. That pays off, even if not near term.
Yeah, I totally have to agree. I just thought about it. Um, when the moment I started using the pro version of Whisperflow, like this voice recording app, I was like, yeah, I use it so much, you should use it too. I even have the pro version.
Yeah.
So you talk about it a lot more actually if you're paying for something.
Yeah. Cause you're invested in
That's
it.
a good
Right. And
point.
then the second
Yeah.
that, like, and I don't know if it's the same for you, but I noticed like if I cancel my paid version, I don't talk about it as much. Like I've done that. I
Yeah.
noticed that, right? Like for a long time I used Loom and I was paying for it, and I just haven't had as much need for it. And so I just have stopped talking about it as much, not by like just purposefully doing it, just because like it's not in my day to day as much, or I don't think about it as much. And so like naturally you just don't talk about it as much because of that. And I think that's probably like an underrated thing. It's like maybe you can't draw dollars to dollars with that, but like that's definitely just like one of those gut instinct things that like people will talk about it more if they're invested in it.
Totally. All right. Um, so I followed this thread now through Blockwalk, but we haven't even talked about who you are actually as a person, and um, what's the journey that led up to actually transitioning from a designer to a founder. You also run a design studio, so it's not just, there's a lot to share, but maybe you
Yeah,
can just share a bit more about what you think the audience should know about you.
sure. So I guess about me, and helpful to know is just like obviously spent 10 years in product design, um, did the Fortune 500 companies, did the startups, just wanted to try out both sides of like what the, corporate America would be, if you will. And found over the years that like I really enjoyed the startup world a little bit more, right? Like even though sometimes it can be like kind of stressful because like it's like a roller coaster, you have to put in a lot of hours one week and then the next week it might be slower because the engineers are working on things, or you just don't really know what you're going to get week to week or how funding is or things like that. But you get to see a whole bunch of different stuff, right? And so I jumped around different places, got to meet a lot of people, and had a lot of fun doing it. And I think when I really got the itch or the taste for it was when I worked with like a team of 5 people, and I worked with this out of the blue, just intro, this founder that had originally started on he started a business that he grew to 100 and then $200 million a year, all bootstrapped quilting business in the middle of nowhere in America in the state of Missouri. And he like had then wanted to start like an app startup. And so I went and worked with him for a bit, and just seeing how that like small grassroots very early on started getting me being like, this, like, I kind of want to do my own thing on this, right? Like it started to get me the itch a little bit because I saw that and I saw what you could do. And like, if you just like, I started to meet people like that. And so that was kind of what stemmed it. And I always just kind of knew in the back of my mind too, like I wanted to do something. Um, and so that kind of just started the itch of doing that. Cause over the years in design, I was like, I feel like I'm putting in all this work for other people's dream, but I'm not working on my own dream. Right. And what if I were to shift all those hours and energy to my own thing, right? And so that's kind of like where a lot of it came from. And I think after years of being in it, you're like, okay, a paycheck's great, but like I'm not building anything bigger. Um, and so then I just like would do attempts for like, a few months, then I'd burn out and be bored, or I'd try something and never get it off the ground, or I'd lose steam, or I'd work on it for a half hour twice a week, and then it would just fizzle out, or I'd spend all the time on the design and then do nothing with marketing, or like I would do all these attempts. And then one day I just was like, enough is enough. Like I have to start like showing myself that I can just build something that takes a long time over a long period of time and stop just having these like new things. Cause I never even made it to like 3 months, I think, prior to start like committing to that. And so while I was working a day job, I don't know, 3 years ago, probably, which was my last full-time job, was 4 years ago, something like that. I just was like, all right, every single day before work, I'm going to get up and I'm going to give myself, I have to do one thing on this side project. It doesn't matter if it's like post a piece of content on LinkedIn. Doesn't matter if it's spend 2 hours on writing a blog article. Like anything counts as long as I'm doing one small thing every single day on this product and reading 30 minutes every day. And because I needed to prove, like, just do something over a sustained period of time just to build up that muscle. Because I think for a lot of people working jobs, if you've never done it or if you're trying to make the transition, that was like the hardest part, was just like being consistent when you don't have energy per se. And so that was like, do it before the day job. So for me, that's what it was. And then, so I did that consistently for like basically 2 years or something. And I was like so stoked about it, proud of it. It got me my first ever product up and built. And I got that first product but I spent like $20,000 to build it. And that was just a total mistake because I was like, no AI at the time, didn't really know how to implement it. I was in the trust of like a development agency over somewhere in Europe, and I don't remember where. Implemented everything automation. I just kept building new features, doing minimal on marketing, having a free version for way too long before I monetized it, made every mistake that you could possibly do. And so while now it could be profitable, if I would have probably knowing what I know now, I would have approached it very differently. So I did that, but so I ended up shutting it down because it was just losing money every month, and I was like, this doesn't make sense with where it's at. I've already sunk so much money into it. I have to sink more money into it to keep going with it. And there's no kind of end in sight. And so I pulled the plug on that. But that one taught me like, what product market fit is, because towards the tail end of it, you get featured in one newsletter that has your audience. Overnight, you get like 400 users. And that was like, whoa, like mind blowing, right? Hopefully this isn't too much of a ramble for y'all, but, and then, product 2, I launched this one, Rally, which was like a design QA tool, which at the time felt perfect and good. And then within, 6 months, we launched the first version pretty quick. And then the second one, we just kind of iterated and tweaked for 6 months and never launched the second version of it. And then I just like my gut, like what my heart wasn't in it after a while. I still worked on it for like a year, but my heart wasn't in it. We traveled the world a bit. was trying to force myself to work on it. And I just kept having this lurking thing in the back of my mind that was like, AI is going to kill this in like no time. And so that was just like a gut call, that was like the time sunk loss, right? Um, and that one I never charged, right? Like never got the paid version up. And so that was like, why did I just spend all this time trying to get users on, talk to them, whatever. It's hard as bootstrapped. And so that's what kind of led us to today with Blockwalk, with going out as a paid version day one, getting it up as fast as possible, going against every grain fiber in my body that like the design has to be this specific way, and get it out the door. Because that's like all the mistakes I made in the first two was like spend this obsessive amount of time on design when it does not matter until you hit this product market fit. And a lot of times that is, a couple years down the road or 4 months down the road or after your round of funding is closed or whatever have you. That's usually when design is, at least now, more important for that. So yeah, hopefully that kind of gives a little bit of background, or I don't know, long-winded way of explaining kind of where we're at.
Yeah, thanks for sharing it. We've known each other for quite some time now, but this is also the first time I heard the in-depth story. So it opened up a lot of extra questions.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to know, again, less about or more about how you approach things. Like you did some user research for probably all of your apps, but specifically also for Rally. How important do you think user research and interviews, walking through them together, through their problems and software, how important do you think this is in 2026?
I think it's always going to be important, but I will say
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the stage that your business is in, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
times have changed a little bit. Um, I think if your business is still in the early phases, like super early, just like need to get a product, and you have competitors, I think there's a lot you can learn directly from them and infer because they've done a lot of the work. But I think nothing will beat you talking to your customers and understanding them and running research, because you really do have to understand their pain points. And the more you talk to them, the more invested they'll be in your product, and the quicker you'll be able to get to that product market fit. So I think, like, I don't think you should ever dismiss it out the door, but I think there are a lot of design and patterns and um, usability things out there that have been solved, and a lot of them you don't have to user test. But what I do think is important is running, um, like, just research with your target customers, like understanding what their pain points are, understanding what's their day-to-day frustrations, how they're using your product, what workarounds are they doing with your product that maybe your product isn't solving exactly what they need, but they're jumping through two other hoops to reach this solution just to use your product or something, right? Like, I think understanding some of those things is really important. Discovery, right? Like if there's like a gut thing that you think, hey, implementing this into our product will help us drive up this key metric, like don't just implement it and then give it to people. Like go understand and uncover those parts of your product and understand, like try to uncover from them, like, why do you think that piece of like adding that feature is going to drive up those metrics, and like digging deeper behind the root cause or the pain points rather than just like ship the thing and get it out the door. Um, that's kind of my take on it. I think it's all kind of like situational and depending on where you're at as a product as a whole. But I don't. Yeah, it's very important. All to be said, it's very important. It's just use it strategically. Don't just test for the sake of testing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like I'm also a designer, but also try to be a businessman. And when I have one customer, for instance, they sell to enterprise, and they basically do all of their user research just as a sales call.
Mm.
So they meet new people, they present features they don't even have yet, and just try to figure out where is actually the pain point, how they can serve them. I wonder if that's also an approach for B2C, where instead of running user interviews, you just try to book them on a call on the annual plan by figuring out what their pain points are. I don't know if anyone has tried that yet, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's business. Yeah, B2C is definitely a different ballpark. I think you can get what I've learned because I've definitely done research for like, enterprise, and I've done research for business to consumers and a lot of my career has been consumer facing apps. And what I've learned about that is like, it's a lot harder to get people on a call to give feedback as a consumer unless they're incentivized with money. Like we used to, like at any place I've done, they always had to give like a $50 gift card to something, or they'd get paid for it, or we have to use like a third party like usertesting.com that we'd pay to get people in because consumers are a lot less likely to do it. Um, because the ticket's just not high enough for them. They don't want to devote 30, they pay $12 a month. The chances of them even to go and give feedback on something for that are lower, right? So that's a lot more challenging. But when you do it, like, yeah, it's just get them in and show them like a prototype, show them here's what we're thinking about doing. Um, what's your gut reaction to these things? Like, and just making sure you don't lead them. I think that's one of the problems with those sales calls, like you said, like a lot of times is like salespeople are not user researchers, right? And they're not people that like maybe think about it in that way. Like they're trying to get research to make the sale. It's a very different mindset versus something else like that. And so a lot of times, like if you're like, do you like this? Like that's not going to get you the outcome of the information about your product that you want. You're like, walk me through. Like, can you talk me through an experience that you did this, or what? Do you remember like why was that frustrating, or like what? Is there anything where you ran into a roadblock, or is there any workarounds that you're doing right now? Like that's one of my favorite ones just on calls to do is like, is there anything you're kind of doing a workaround with to make sure that you can use our app or our software properly? Because there's a lot of times like they're doing some weird jump through hoop to be able to get your product to do what they want it to do, but they'll never specifically tell you that unless you kind of allude to that. So I think it's just very different mindsets of talking to consumers. That's why I actually think like sometimes the consumer side of things is like data and screen recordings are sometimes more truthful in pointing you in the right direction sometimes because they're not as leading, right? Like what people say versus what people do is very different.
How have you balanced that in like either Blockwalk or previous endeavors like qualitative versus quantitative research?
Yeah, I think I always make sure we have both if we can. Um, I think I look at the data, see if something is telling us like what we think, and then I go validate some of that data against, the qualitative stuff and see like what people are saying versus that. Like one example that always sticks out in my head was at Etsy. We did this test where they were trying to like cross promote items on like a product page, and they wanted to feature them towards the top of the page. And so we ran all these user tests, and uh, everybody would be like, I hate that is at the top. Like, I want to see my product first. And it annoyed them. They didn't like seeing it. Every single time we ran it, they would always say that. Like, it's distracting to have like a banner of recommended items before you see the product that you actually want to see. But then anytime they would move it to anywhere else on the page, sales would tank. And so it didn't matter how much people would say that, it always converted better. It always drove up company business. And so that was one of those things like people say they don't like it, but then they engage with it more, which leads to more purchases. And so that's one of the things like you do have to kind of follow the data. Even if people are telling you one thing, you have to like match and track those two things together. So that's, I feel like, an example that always stands out in my head. And they eventually just killed doing research on that because I think they did 20 rounds of trying to move that thing around over the years. Every single time they just could not get it to go up by moving it anywhere else.
Yeah, that's a great take. I understand that. Um, there's also one thing, like in the beginning you mentioned like you wanted Blogwalk to be profitable. That's something you learned from previous like products. How did you approach that? Like getting your first paying customer and also making sure it's like profitable, not investing like hundreds, thousands of dollars into marketing. How did you approach that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So this time around, like getting my first paying users has been friends, family, and probably LinkedIn and organic content, right? Like because I spent the last, I don't know, year and a half posting on LinkedIn every day, I built up an audience. So like there's some interest there. I know everybody there has desk jobs, desk workers, things like that. So that's there. Um, and then just like word of mouth, like friend shares it with a friend that I maybe don't know. And, that helps with kind of organically getting paying users on. And because I have it set up right now as like the annual plan, it's a little bit more upfront, right? So like you get a trial and then you get an annual plan. And so like that gives you a little bit more buffer. And so one of the things I'm doing is like, I'm not just investing all of that money back right now. Like there will be a time when I invest, it's just kind of sitting and waiting, but I'm making sure that when I do invest that money, it's in the right spots. Because previously I did not necessarily invest in the right spots. I kind of just like spent money here and there. Um, because I heard this thing from, I think it's probably some podcasts, and I heard it from Gary Vee a long time ago that was like, there's no sense in like dumping money into like paid ads or marketing when you don't even know if those are going to work. Then you're just going to burn cash when you don't know if the message or the ad resonates. Because it could be to the right audience. It's just not resonating because it's poorly built. And so the recommendation would always like create organic content. And then when that content starts doing good and that starts driving a little bit of conversion, then you can put paid dollars behind it. And so that's kind of the way I've been looking at starting to approach it, is like test out a bunch of organic formats. When one goes viral or one resonates or one really drives a lot of downloads and conversion rates, then I'll take that money that I've made from, the slow trickle of referral annual passes, and then I'll put money into that. And as long as more money comes back than I spent on the ad, then that's a successful campaign. I'll put more and more money behind it, at least on the organic side. And then the other one is just like trying different platforms or angles of spreading the word about it, right? So whether that's Reddit groups, Facebook groups, whether that's getting featured in newsletters, which is an angle I'll probably try, like finding like, spaces in that to spread the word. One thing I am going to do some spend on this time around is I'm going to try to attend some local event meetups and try to do like a booth at like a fitness event or a wellness retreat or a digital detox type of thing. And kind of do that. And so that I think is worth like $100 or $200 to do, because you can just move your booth to different events and do that. And I think there's something interesting about like, can I make that into an experience that people remember and that shares, and that if people share that, then they'll remember that and they'll talk about it, versus only online. And I think a lot of people aren't doing that. And so I think that might be an interesting way of going about it as well, from a cheap way of kind of doing marketing.
Have you, like in the last few years when you were creating content, have you found out like what type converts best versus like what type of content might be more like, hey, I can reach a lot of people, but no one really wants to try my product, versus, hey, this post specifically drove a conversion?
Yeah, I think I've learned that it's like you want to, I mean, you can be writing the content that goes viral and or creating content that goes viral, but it seems like that stuff doesn't convert that well. Or if it does, it's a really, really small percentage, because like the nature of virality is it just goes out to everybody, right? And everybody ends up seeing it, but very few of them are actually looking for a solution or that target customer, right? And I think that's why probably ads convert better than organic, just virality. But I've like the ones that are like the niche specific is usually the ones that convert better, even if they don't get very many views, right? Like it's weird because it's like I tried a little experiment on like YouTube Shorts where I posted only one type of content for like a week straight, basically got 0 downloads in a week. But the views were significantly higher than any other week. But then when I switched to doing the ones that were getting less views, I got multiple downloads in a week, right? Like downloads came in when I just switched up that type. And so it's like, I think you have to have a mixture of both, right? Like you need the virality a little bit. You need the high reach to get your just name in front of people and your app in front of people. But you also need the stuff that once people have kind of seen that, have been exposed, they see the stuff that's a little bit more high intent converting stuff. And yeah, I think that's kind of how well, at least what I've noticed. And I think that kind of also hits home my point of getting featured in a newsletter like a while back, like literally woke up overnight to 300 or whatever people that had like converted and joined my email platform, which did end up leading to paying users at the time. And it was an accident, but it showed me like getting in front of the right people, very targeted, will convert better than anything else.
Yeah, that's a good point. I am also creating content, of course, and I've seen this pattern: good viral content versus actually converting. Um, it's apparently it's the same when it comes to either services, products, or even app downloads. It works either way.
Yeah.
So this is go to market is always interesting. I want to talk also a bit more about the actual design and building part because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am a
Yeah.
designer.
For
I
sure.
love to build. Um, the You're not an engineer, right? You're not a developer.
Correct. Correct.
Yet you built and launched an iOS app or an app.
Yep.
How? How?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll talk you through that. Well, I think a large part of that too was like, you obviously know in the design world, AI has come in, and I was like, I need to immerse myself in this. And like, what better way than to actually build something, right? Like, not this like theory or prototyping or all that stuff, right? Like, or do it for a client. Like, if you're invested in it yourself, like, you're going to go way deeper. You're going to get way more understanding than just like building it sometimes for a client or doing that. And so, knowing that like all that's kind of like, yeah, I went in to do that. And so I guess I can kind of circle back on what we were touching on way earlier in the call, but like started the whole thing. I'll kind of tell you my whole process here. Started the whole thing with building out the project requirement document in Claude. After kind of detailing out everything that I wanted in my onboarding experience, who my ideal target users were, what the key functionality of it would be. I gave it my flow, honestly, in Figma. So I like did the whole sticky note out flow with some notes. I had it be able to go in and reference that, talked through it, and then had that all good. And then it spit me back a requirements document. I went in and tweaked some things, some of the language, eventually got it to a point where it was like, felt good. And told it I wanted to use Cursor and to walk me through everything on how to set it up. Cause I didn't even like, honestly, going into it, I didn't know how to set up a, you know, on my desktop. I didn't know how to set up like the file structure. I haven't done any of that since, gosh, college maybe is when I did like HTML and CSS and like did website building and things like that. And like, I still have a base understanding of that, but like, so I was like, okay, as if I'd never done anything, I wanted to be walked through that. And the first attempt, honestly, I couldn't even get the thing built. Like, I tried to get it up and it just crashed, and I was getting pissed off. And like, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I can't even, like, it wouldn't even build, nothing would happen. And so I was like, okay, we got to like, let's restart this. And so I think I had to do a second version of a PRD and like be a little bit more intentional with the planning and like telling it like, I want you to get as granular with me as go to this page, click on this button on this menu item, go to this drop down, select this, paste this into that. Like I said, get it like really meticulous. Because if you don't know it, like it's really tough to even like go into the proper like areas of Apple's development tools, right? Like, so to build the whole thing, I had to build it with Xcode and Swift, which is what you do for an Apple iOS. And I had never opened it until that time. And so I even had to have Claude, like, I need you to walk me through, like, what do I need? Like, what do I download? What do I, like, how do I set up a file? Like, what things do I link? What's all the stuff? And so having to have it super, super meticulous was important. And like, how do I kick it off with Cursor? And eventually I had Cursor kind of take over all that stuff, right? So I think eventually I went into Cursor just directly and said, here's the PRD. Here's what I'm trying to build. Explained as much context as I could. And then I said, now I want to go screen by screen, one screen at a time, and let's build out this experience. And let's start with the first page of the welcome experience and do that. And so I think I designed in Figma 3 screens, maybe 5, to get the general design direction. But I intentionally was like, I am not going to spend all the time building out every single screen, every single edge case, because I don't think it's necessary. And I also want to see what kind of limits we can get with Cursor, right? And with these AI tools, like how good are they? Are they going to be good enough to get to the polish level and the quality that I feel okay enough with as a designer putting my name on? Because that is another thing for myself, and like good or bad, if it looks like absolute shit versus just like kind of shitty, like I don't really want to even say that that's behind me, because to me, that's like a reputation thing that I don't love, right? So it's got to have a balance. So I was curious about some of that stuff. And so that's what I did. So I basically went into Cursor and gave it all the documentation, all the information, and then connected the Figma MCP, which is like how you connect Cursor to Figma, turned it on in Cursor. I think it's like 1 or 2 steps of validation. It's super easy. And then I said, okay, great. Copy link to that Figma specific screen. And I said, let's start with this onboarding screen and build this out, this welcome screen. And then I moved into the next screen. And then I just talked back and forth with it to tweak something, and to fix the spacing here and there if it was like, to update the stuff. And then would say, okay, now let's continue down do the next screen. I just kind of went screen by screen all the way through until until kind of every step in my onboarding process was complete. And then if something, once kind of all that foundational stuff was built, then if something looked like garbage, then I went, okay, now I'm going to update this in Figma, go back into Cursor and say, I want to update this one specific screen. Here's the Figma screen to reference, update it to match it exactly 1-to-1, and then would talk with it. And so I kind of worked backwards that way to work with building it for getting through everything. And then I would say, okay, now let's make a plan to implement the back end, right? And so we would go through, and then I would have it update all the stuff, talk back and forth with Cursor a bunch. And I did most of it in auto mode on Cursor, unless I'd run into like endless loops, and then I'd have to try out different models, because that sometimes got really annoying. And then honestly, the hardest part was getting it submitted to the App Store. And that I think it took 7 times of rejections, or 5. It was something up there. And gosh, what else was there? Connecting just like the right names of files to Apple, to this, to the accounts, to paying for a developer. There's just so much that goes into that stuff. And like, I had basically just like Cursor tell me once I got in there, everything to do. Where do I go? I would send screenshots of what I'm looking at. I would say which of these three options. So I would like, if I didn't know in Xcode, I would just take a screenshot and say, which of these three options do I select? And I would say, do this one. I would do that. And then if I got to the next step, I would say, screenshot, which of these ones do I select? And then which of these? And then is there an error? And then it just kept dropping endless screenshots into Cursor until I would get this stuff built. And then testing was a pain in the ass for sure. Like that was hard. That's still the hardest thing for me right now is the testing piece.
What was so hard about testing? Can you share a bit more?
Yeah, and this, I mean, this could be just because of my obviously not developer background and it's hard to test stuff, but like testing payments and testing paywalls, and those are really hard because Apple only like if you have already a plan on your account, it doesn't show you the same triggers that a new user would see. You only see certain ones in a demo environment. It kind of bypasses paywalls. It doesn't show the right, like there's a lot of those like real versus test environments on paywalls that like I still haven't found a great solution to see what they're seeing. So that's challenging if you actually have a paid version of your app, but you're trying to see what the first time user would see if they didn't have a paid version, or if they have an expired 7-day trial, or if their trial expires and then they come back to the app and try to go through the onboarding again a couple months later. Like all those are really challenging. So that was hard. A lot of the weird like features took just a lot of time to do. Like in our app, for example, you go through, you set up everything, you block your apps, and then your trigger is like at midnight, everything resets, right? Your apps automatically lock again if you've hit your steps. You, you know, all that stuff auto kicks off. And you literally I couldn't test that except for every single night I would go to bed. And then in the middle of the night, I would hope that my stuff automatically locked the next day. And some days I was like, shit, and it wouldn't lock. And I was like, damn it, now I have to go through all this bug testing and then try to figure out if it'll lock again tonight because I couldn't simulate it because I tried the simulation and it worked, but then I would do it at night and it didn't work, right? So like some of the stuff you can only do with real things. I would try to change the time on my phone. Like there's a lot of weird nuances that like they were just challenging and took a lot of time to test. Or like for like us, it's like counting your steps and then making sure that it triggers the unlock you can only do by physically going for a walk and triggering it. A lot of that stuff was, challenging. Or like, what happens if I log out? Like, is it going to reset everything? I have to delete, I think I'd delete the app a bunch of times to make sure it like still kept things. Like a lot of those things, like you can't do unless you physically are on your phone, you're activating, you're doing it. Like that stuff is, I wouldn't trust AI to test it itself, right? Like I think that's the stuff you physically have to do because it's so on your phone, on a device, all of that stuff.
That sounds painful. I'm sure this is a universal experience, not just for designers who just started out to code. Like contrary to most apps, I think your app, even though it is designed with AI, doesn't look like that at all. It seems very professional, and I wonder what part of your process made that happen, and how can you avoid this AI slop when designing and developing apps?
I think that's a good, well, thank you. Cause sometimes I look at it and I'm like, maybe it's just cause I know how it was built, but it feels sometimes like that, but also it's just because I want to take it to another level of polish and add a lot of little micro interactions and things like that, that like, it wouldn't be that hard now that I know how to do it, but it is time, and that's not a good time spend right now. I think the way I avoided that was a few things. The devil's in the details for sure. When it comes to making stuff not look just AI generated. It's, I think, getting a initial design direction and don't trust AI in the beginning to just give you everything. So I think if you can get either design out a couple screens yourself, right? Like to give you the general direction. And then every single time you prompt one screen, you say reference the styles that we have based on the kind of our existing screens. Like I want everything to match those styles. Make sure it fits the way that those are, the color schemes, the fonts, the spacings, all of that. Like make sure everything follows that general style. Like I didn't even build out a design system on this one because like I didn't need it yet, right? Like there doesn't make sense to build out a design system if I'm just trying to get V1 up. There'd be a point where like I think it's stored in Cursor. They have its design system there, but it's not built out into like a Figma file where I reference it. Maybe there's backwards what maybe you should at first, but I think because it was so quick to do it this way, it was like design out a few screens to get the idea and then use that as the reference. I think now that I've gotten more into it, you could probably reference a screenshot or two and have it get it pretty damn close to that to use it to reference, but it won't get the spacing and everything to make it look like great. So if you can design out the thing with really good spacing to make it not look like crap in Figma first, that'll help a long way because then it'll start to infer some of the spacing and it'll get better. I think the second piece is it's amazing what going in and tweaking some background colors on what is generated, removing background colors, switching out iconography and pictures with what you like intentionally goes a long way because a lot of the stuff that gets generated that looks like crap is a lot of it is just because they use the placeholder icons. There's a default color background, a default shape, right? Like a lot of that stuff can be solved by like 3 or 4 visual tweaks that will make it feel like a designer did it versus you just let the AI do everything. I think for me, like those made a big difference. Like there's a couple screens where I can think about, I was like, oh, I wouldn't have even thought to design that, but like, that's a good idea. Like the AI made that and I like that interaction. But if I do these couple tweaks, it'll look significantly better visually. Like those kinds of things go a long way. Or I don't know, like rotating icons 45 degrees. Like sometimes that just adds a little bit of something, but like takes no effort. Like just spend, I think those go a long way in making something not feel AI generated, just like giving it a foundation.
I wonder if it's just us designers who really care about, oh, this looks like AI slop, or if people generally likes, this seems AI generated. I don't think I will download it.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
a good
know.
question. I
Maybe it's
wonder
just
that
us.
too. I wonder, like, this is my thought on this. And maybe I'm wrong, but like my guess is that in a few years there will be this, and maybe not a few years. Maybe it's gets so good that that's not the case, but there will be, how like you see a website or you did at one point from like felt like it was built in the early 2000s and like you're like I wouldn't trust anything on that. Maybe it's like a government website or something, right? You're like I don't trust putting my information into that. I think that's is going to become an AI website in the future. I think there's going to be a point where all those websites that were considered like those 2000s websites are going to be like start to become so noticeable that people aren't going to trust them because they just all look like that. And that's going to become like the new 2000 style website, the really old school ones, because they're there. And so maybe there will be a point to that, or people will be like, oh, if websites look like that, then I just assume they're going to be broken or they don't work as well. And so the trust level of those, I think, is going to be lower versus like a higher polish one, I think is going to have more trust from humans. But that's my thought about it as a designer is I think like trust level is where AI versus not. But maybe that is just us as designers noticing that.
It's hard to say, like, because I'm also wondering, especially when it comes to apps, like, is this just a guy who tried out something for a weekend and launched it? Or is there actually like, do they want to make it good? Does it make sense to start using this tool? Because the one thing I hate is getting invested into tools and then they either get bought or discontinued. And then, yeah, you have to learn another tool or you have to get used to another one. And um, that's like, that's the one thing I really think websites should do is like, you can't have this AI slop on your website because that's the first touch point. And if it looks like AI, people are not going to trust you. That's just a hard reality. So, especially when every website looks like built with AI, if you just
Yeah.
put on 5% more effort, you're going to stand out immediately.
Yeah, I think I would say the only industries probably there's like I think that most tech things like that's probably true. I think the industries that it probably does not matter at all are going to be like it just makes me think of like blue collar jobs, right? Like roofing business, like they
Yeah.
don't give a shit if it's AI generated, right? Like that's not going to matter. Um, flooring, things like that. Like if those like I feel like if those ones feel things like that, like not as probably not a huge deal, right? Like those probably get away with it. A lot of them is from referrals. Those are just to like have them be a formalized website, right? I think there's a lot of those industries where it probably doesn't matter. I don't think that's my guess, but like the majority, I would say like yeah, it's like you can sniff it out pretty easily. It's almost like your website, yeah, it needs to be the first impression. And then if your product is AI generated, that's not as big of a deal. If you got people in the product and they're using it and you continually iterate it, as long as things works. Like, yeah, I think there's a use case for everything, but the front facing website on most industries, like, yeah, it's definitely a trust killer.
Mm, mm. There's one more thing I wanted to ask before. I just didn't get to it yet. You said like over time and with failures in the past, you learned when to go into details and when not to focus too much on design. Do you have anything you could share with either founders who are designers or who are not designers at all, how they can balance that a bit better? Like going way too much into details, micro animations versus saying, yeah, it's AI slop, but I don't even care.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think where I've gotten to this point with it now is when if nobody knows about the app, right? You're not getting regular downloads. You don't have a bunch of people in there, then it doesn't matter if someone hovers over or clicks on a button and a little micro animation happens or like no one sees it. It doesn't matter, right? Like, or if you're trying to go deep into this one specific edge case, if 1 out of every 1,000 people see it, it doesn't matter. Like, I think there's like a thing. It's like I think the way I've looked at it is like, don't use it as like your coping mechanism to go deep on something when you don't know, when you don't feel like you should be, when you don't want to do what you know you should be doing, I think is what it is. Like, I think as a designer, as a founder, a lot of the times because we've been doing that or like that's what we're used to, we want to spend time on doing those things because that's what we've been doing, what we know, and that's our specialty and it's comfortable. But the stuff that's uncomfortable is what we probably should be doing. And I think if it's a critical thing to go deep that can drive conversion rates, that's a good one to go deep on, right? Or it can build trust in your product that leads to that, or maybe it's a paywall and it could lead to more like income. If it's like a big drop off point on onboarding, like those are important times to go in deep with the caveat that unless you're not getting more, unless you don't have eyeballs on it, because even if it's up and you're getting 3 people to view it like a week or 3 people to view it a day, that even if you got that 100% perfect, it's not enough data or people to where you should be spending your time doing that. Right. Shit. Even like I recently updated our paywall. I don't think I should have done that. Right. I think that like even a reflection, right? Like I think I spent a whole day doing that because of me trying to test, like because of the testing. Right. And that wasn't a good use of my time, reflecting back, right? Like until there was more and more traction, I think again, right, unless you hit a certain threshold, even those things that like what we consider would be good uses of going deep, you shouldn't, right? Yeah, unless it's driving key business metrics after you have steady views on your website, your product landing page, your app store page, your ads are resonating, your organic content, until those things are getting steady, like traffic, then like it doesn't make much sense to go deep on anything as long as your core product and functionality is there.
All right. So it's okay if you have some AI slop on your settings screen. It's not the screen that drives conversions, that drives more people into the app. But it is fair to invest some time into your onboarding, maybe even the marketing materials. Yeah, I
I
love
would say
that.
so. I think, yeah, marketing is a good use of it, right? Like I will
Yeah,
say when your website traffic eventually picks up, right? Like then you could spend a little bit more time on design. There's also a difference between like, yeah, look at your website traffic. If you don't get that many views, like a basic landing page will work for now, right? Um, when you start getting regular traction, then you're like, okay, maybe, and you're getting a lot of bounce and a lot of bounce rate and a lot of people not clicking, and you're not converting, you're not getting more downloads. Then like that is a good thing to spend time on, or spend the budget on, or pay for a designer to help you with it. Um, but until it gets regular, it's probably not, right? And I think that's a thing just in general for like I think founders to see is like there's a right and a wrong time to spend time on design, and there's a right and a wrong time to spend money on a designer, and a right and wrong time to use AI, right? Like everything's got like a time and a place for it. Um, and being able to recognize busy work from real work.
I guess that's a challenge on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think now is a good time to wrap it up. Wyatt, it was such a pleasure to have you on here. If there is one thing that you want people to do after this podcast, what should they do? Where should they click? I will, of course, put a link somewhere, but what do you want people to do?
Yeah. I mean, I think first and foremost, I think I would just say like for the builder, just like try things, right? Like get after it, do it. Don't be scared. It doesn't have to be a perfect idea. It doesn't have to be the perfect thing. Um, and then, yeah, if you spend too much time on your phone, go check out Blockwalk, give it a download. Um, you know, and see if it helps you. And would love feedback from people. And hopefully, this has stimulated people's brains to think a little bit about what's possible. About founders, when to bring in a designer, when to think critically, um, and yeah, go follow me on LinkedIn or whatnot. So
Lovely. All right. Thank you, Wyatt. This was the first episode of the Design Led podcast. A bit scrappy, and I know we can improve it. So if you're listening until now, let me know what you think. Let me know how we can improve it. As a designer, I'm always asking for feedback, as you should too. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and who I should invite next. What should we talk about? I would love to keep learning from what is interesting to you as well. That being said, I hope I see you in the next episode, and yeah, have a good evening. Bye bye.